Hey there, everyone. It's Hanny here from SidePro, back with another video. Today, I want to talk about port forwarding, what it is, why it's important, why you would want to use it. So port forwarding is a way to connect to services that are running inside the cloud. To better illustrate this, let's walk through an example. Let's say I have a Next.js application that I'm developing locally on my system. I got it to the perfect spot I want, and now it's ready to be shown to the rest of the world. I want to deploy it to SidePro. So using something like SidePro Push, I can get my app deployed to the cloud. Once it's there, my app now needs a database to operate correctly. To do this, I'll use SidePro Service Create to create a Postgres instance and bind it to the application so it can be used. Now, there may be a point where I need to actually connect to the Postgres instance to run queries by hand, analyze the data, what have you. The problem is there's a firewall between my laptop and the Postgres instance. This is for security purposes and everyone's own protection. So how do I connect to this instance? How do I run queries, for example? What I need is an ability to poke a hole, essentially, through the firewall to communicate with the Postgres server. Well, technically, it's not poking a hole through the firewall, but rather wrapping a TCP connection through a WebSocket, but the end result is the same. This is where port forwarding would come in. Running something like SidePro Service Port Forward, I can actually establish a connection to the database through the firewall and communicate as if it was sitting locally on my system. Let me show you how to do this. So if I come to my terminal, and let's show the running services by running SidePro Services. You can see I have a running database already, Postgres database. I can get more details by running SidePro Service Show and the name of the database, which is ms-docsdb. And it gives me a bunch of useful information, the Postgres server, the version running, whether it's deployed. The most important point would be the password down here, which I need to connect to the database. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't need to know this password. When you bind a service to an application, it will pre-populate a bunch of environment variables, including the credentials, and your app just needs to consume these environment variables. But because we are now connecting directly to the service, I actually need this password. So from here, I now need to establish a port forward. So I would go SidePro Service Port Forward, the name of the service, ms-docsdb, and if I just go --help, it'll give me some more information. And the one thing I do need to specify is the local port. Now, all services run on some sort of port, and in terms of Postgres, you can see it's running on the standard port of 5432. I need to tell it what local port to map to this remote port. So I'm going to use the same Postgres port of 5432. This will bind locally 5432 to remote 5432. You can see when I do this, it tells me that it is currently forwarding. I can use Control-C to stop the forwarding. But now to communicate with it, I actually need to open up another terminal to communicate over the TCP socket. Opening up another terminal, I'm now going to run the PSQL command. PSQL is the local Postgres client, which you can get through Brew. I'm going to pass in some additional flags like -h localhost because I am creating a port forward from a remote to a local system. I'm going to pass localhost, username of Postgres, -W will prompt me for the password, and pass in the local port of 5432. It's going to ask me for the password, which we have in this output. And it connected. And I can verify this if I do \L. You can see it's listing all the remote databases. SidePro will auto-generate all the username, passwords, and databases for you. And you can see it generated a hashed database, which I need to connect to. So if I pass in that \C and the database name, paste in the password one more time, it says I'm now connected. And I can verify this by listing the tables with \D. And you can see here are the tables of my database, which I can now run select queries against. And there we go. So this is an example of using port forwarding to be able to connect to remote services. You can do this with any of the services deployed that obviously listen to a port. Well, that's all I have for now regarding port forwarding. I'll be back with more videos, so stay tuned and thanks for watching.